Once in a while.
I do have a story in an anthology coming out on July 15th. It's Bat Out of Hell. It's based on the Meatloaf album from whatever that was.
It's a great album, rock opera, man.
I have All Revved Up with No Place to Go. It is hands down the darkest story I've ever written. It's just
I've got to read this.
I get to exercise a different part of my head for short stories.
I'm sorry, you're working on it, or is it out?
It's out. It comes out July 15th. Okay.
On what? Like, where do you find it?
Wherever books are sold. So, Bat Out of Hell, edited by Don Bruns.
I would ask how many pages, but we don't do that here.
You know better. You know better.
It's words. Our guest in this segment, Delegate S, Christian Anders out of the 97th. Chris, how are you, sir?
Wonderful this morning. How are you, gentlemen?
Marvelous. Where do we find you on this beautiful morning?
I'm actually sitting in my office right now. I've been on a slew of phone calls already this morning, and will probably be most of the day with the air conditioner turned up as high as possible.
Smart move.
You say your office, Chris, office in Charleston, or do you have your office here?
No,
as well?
office here in the district.
Okay.
As in D.C.?
No, not
your legislative district.
In the 97th district.
In your district.
In near Weinbrenner Crossing. Okay. So
much better. The traffic is a lot better where you are, though.
Oh, absolutely. I spent the weekend in D.C. For the National Leadership Collective for pro-life groups, and the traffic's horrible in D.C., and recently I was in Boston, and the traffic is even worse, if you can believe it or not. It's worse in Boston.
That's hard to believe but does Boston have as many traffic cameras as D.C. has, ready to give you a fine for everything you do?
Probably. I don't know. I wasn't looking for them. I was just trying not to get run over.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Turn signals are optional in New England. I realize that.
Yeah, they are everywhere. I had a person the other day, I think it was on 45, just stopped in the middle of 45, came to a complete stop, and then made a turn. And I thought, would it have been that much effort to just put your turn signal on so everybody knew what you were doing?
They might have recently migrated from Boston then, because when I was up there, nobody used a turn signal. It was what my granddaddy used to call cutting and shooting nonstop. And I was up there in we were driving my wife's big diesel truck, so I just figured I'll just stay in my lane, go the speed limit, and just hope nobody hits me. But parking was fun then. But yeah, it was traffic is not near as bad in D.C. as it is in New England. So if you've never driven to Boston, really don't.
Fair, good advice. What was your participation in the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill?
I was part of the organizing committee for that event. We've been meeting on and off for 18 months on that, mostly virtual. And I was actually, as you know, I'm a big history dork. I was one of the Continental commanders for the event, and we had somewhere around 1,500 reenactors there, and between 30 to 40,000 the visiting public each day, commemorating the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill.
That sounds 1,400 to 1,500 reenactors. That sounds like it might be a pretty big tourist thing.
It's very big, very big. It's not as big as some of the previously. I've put on a lot of Civil War reenactments, and we would have 5, 6, 10, 20,000 Civil War reenactors. Revolutionary War is not as big as Civil War, at least not yet, but who knows with the 250th anniversary cycle. But for every single tourist that comes to an area to view one of these reenactments or these commemorations, they spend an average of around $160 each to the local economy. So you can imagine the huge boost it was for the Boston area to have these events there.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. How did you get involved in doing reenacting?
Well, I grew up outside of the Antietam battlefield, so I grew up on the battlefield basically. And, you know, I spent a lot of time at the Park Service. I was one of the what they call Yellow Vest volunteers when I was 12 years old at the park, and started giving talks and tours on the battlefield at around 13 or 14 years of age. Did that for a long time. And one day I was out there and I saw, you know, it was July, it's 90 degrees, and there's these guys out there in wool uniforms. And suddenly, for some reason, I don't know why, I'm like, hey, I want to wear a wool uniform at 90 degrees. So I began that journey, you know, about 1986. and spent many years all over the country helping commemorate the different events that helped shape our republic. So we've raised at one point somewhere over $500,000 for battlefield preservation to preserve these sites without taking taxpayer money, just working with the private sector and donors. So I can say we've preserved like the McDowell battlefield, parts of the Shenandoah Valley, and now we're working towards a lot of Revolutionary War battlefields because a lot of those are completely built up, especially the New York campaign. Can you imagine that there was fighting in Brooklyn, there was fighting in Harlem Heights, there was fighting on Broadway in New York City, Long Island? Nothing remains. Fort Washington, which you had soldiers from the Eastern Panhandle, Captain Stevenson's Independent Rifle Company, actually captured at Fort Washington. Try to find that site today in downtown New York City. It doesn't exist as a small plaque. Yeah. So we're trying to preserve as much property without taking money from the taxpayers.
Now, as a result of participating in this, you missed the interim session, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah. I had planned this out a long time ago. Worked on it for like I said, close to 18 months. And at the interims, you don't vote on anything. A lot of time, it's just more lobbyists lobbying you to do X, Y, and Z. I'm sure there are meetings, but on the back end of that, the taxpayers didn't have to pay for me to go, and I received all the reports, which I read through. So, I consider that a gain to the taxpayers.
Bill?
Yeah, a couple of things. Very quickly going back to Antietam, then I want to come back to your policies. Antietam for several years had the candlelight tour on the anniversary of the battle. They stopped doing it 4 or 5 years or so ago. And I thought it was one of the most wonderful events that I had witnessed. Will they start those again, or do you have any idea?
I don't have any idea. I stopped doing the Civil War living history about 6 or 7 years ago. About 3 or 4. And they used to do a lot of programming there, whether it was the where you have the illuminaires the first weekend in December, where you see 23,000 illuminary, the candles in the bags for one for every casualty, to the candlelight tours. They did that also at Second Manassas down the Bull Run battlefield. Some of those programs have gone by the wayside. I don't know why. I don't know what the situation is with the National Park Service, but I thought that gave the visiting public, whenever it's dark and everything's by candlelight, you can suspend your disbelief and get, kind of time travel back in time and see what actually was going on, and it brought the events home. And I wish they would do more of those again.
And it really did. They in the early days in Antietam, they had the horses running back and forth. You could smell the horses. Your imagination did run wild. It was a phenomenal event. Going to your policies, looking at the legislative policies, Chris, I see one on restore the 10th Amendment. Refresh me what the 10th Amendment is, please.
Well, the 10th Amendment essentially is any power not given to the federal government is given to the states and to the voters, respectively. There's just far too much federal government overreach, whether it is the Department of Education, the EPA. The list is long and not very distinguished, where the federal government can't mandate states do certain things, so what they do is they bribe states with tax dollars, and they're really effective at doing that in West Virginia. If you look at our budget, most of our budget, the great majority is federal tax dollars, and of course when you take federal tax dollars, you take all the strings that come with it. And while that's an important one, there are a few other policies that, I really honed in on this past legislative session. And the more I learn about what's actually going on, the more important they become to me. Everything from stopping the abortion pill trafficking, which, I spent most of the weekend with pro-life groups in D.C., and I was actually humbled to receive one of 5 national awards for actually fighting and being a pro-life champion, because the primary thing I was trying to stop these abortion pills flowing into the state, because while we are a life at conception state, if you're 14 years or older, you can go on your phone and with no medical supervision, no parental permissions, you can have these pills shipped to your home. Now, what I found out over the weekend really disgusted me with this, because about 70% of abortions now are happening in the home, where they're taking these pills, these chemical abortion pills, and then they are essentially flushing the abortion down the toilet. talking with Students for Life, they just had a study where they've been studying water in various cities. They're finding everything from, well, first of all, the chemicals are there. The abortion pills are in the public water system. But people are actually drinking abortions because the way the systems are set up now, if you're on a public water system, there's 30 million tons of human waste going into the public water system, and it's not filtering it out. So it's almost, I hate to say it this way, it's almost like you're drinking dead babies. And it absolutely disgusts you. And I was looking over that study, which will be out probably within the next month or two. It really sickens you to know this is happening in the civilized society and that we're still allowing this to happen in West Virginia.
Do they give details, parts per million? I know John's a former safety engineer. He's been outspoken in the past about claims of things in the water supply from forever chemicals to you name it. Mm-hmm. This is the newest one that we're hearing about. What detail do you have?
As far as the detail, well, it depends upon what type of water system you're set up on. If you set up some cities and some public water systems, I'm researching that now in West Virginia, so I don't have an answer which system. Of course, that depends upon the county. If your septic or your sewer system, your public sewer system, actually is taking toilet water, cleaning it out, and running it back into drinking water, the concentrations can be quite high. I don't have those numbers in front of me.
No septic system does that.
No, and most sewer systems do not do it either.
There's a treatment
Chris,
plant.
they have their separate systems altogether.
Right. Well, but Austin, Texas doesn't, for example. And there are quite a few listed that actually do that. But even if you don't, if it's just going back into general use water, not drinking water, what happens is it does get into the crops, it gets into everything else, and eventually you end up in your well water. So this is a major problem. So that's why, I champion, stopping the trafficking of these bills into West Virginia, and I'll do so again this upcoming session.
Well, I'll tell you what, Drinking Dead Babies is a great title for a horror movie.
I hope John doesn't write a book on that.
No, I absolutely will not.
Never say never.
And if you do, are you going to credit Chris?
Yes, if I do, I will.
Never say never, John.
I want to shift gears again. In WV News back in May, you put out a rather passionate article about West Virginia is tired of being used for Virginia's profit, and it deals with expansion of electric transmission lines through the state. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Mm-hmm. What was the last part? I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Oh, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. I put that article out throughout the state because what's happening is they're still trying to push expanding energy transmission lines through the use of eminent domain to pipe power over to Virginia so Virginia can continue to reap tax dollars off of these data centers that are going in all over Virginia. So West Virginia would, again, it depends upon, it's all kind of up in the air whether it's going to be 11 counties or 17 counties, how they're going to run or they're looking to run these transmission lines. But I know Jefferson County is really targeted with this situation where, eminent domain should never be used so that a private corporation can profit, and that's what these data centers are. And they're talking about using eminent domain, taking more property, expanding the transmission lines to 3 times their size. Because you see, Virginia went completely green new pipe dream. They went completely, quote unquote, renewable energy. So they can't produce the energy now to power these data centers that they want to have. So they look around, they say, well, look, West Virginia has that. West Virginia is an exporter of power. So why don't we just pump their power over here so we can continue our Green New Deal insanity and at the same time reap all the benefits, the tax benefits of having these data centers. And, of course, it's all up to the PSC in Charleston. There's a lot of fighting back and forth. It was put on hold last December, but they're trying to resurrect it again. And we, absolutely cannot let that happen. We cannot have property owners have their property essentially taken by force, even though they're compensated, they have no choice in the matter, so that Virginia can continue to have these data centers and reap the benefits, and West Virginians just lose again.
So you're proposing to define eminent domain to allow in certain instances and restrict in other instances. Is that right, Chris?
Proposals, first of all, is to make sure the PSC does not approve these transmission lines whatsoever. Secondly, eminent domain should only be used when it is to the true common good and used by the government, not for private corporations to make money. So, there needs to be some real hard looks at what they're actually doing with eminent domain. But the last thing we want to do is see Berkeley County and Jefferson County property owners lose their property so Virginia can continue to reap tax dollars, and we end up at the short end of the stick again.
So splitting out the eminent domain issue just to the power lines themselves, somebody in West Virginia must be making money off of this. Who is that?
I imagine some of the power companies might. But with the current, now that the governor has signed the microgrid bill, I can't see why we can't have the data centers here. Now, of course, there's problems with data centers, too, which I have been very vocal about. I want to be sure that they're not draining the aquifer and that they use a closed-loop system so that we don't drain people's private wealth. And I also don't want them plunked down beside, just anywhere where you have a situation where people's property value goes in the tank because suddenly there's this huge mega building beside of them humming 24 hours a day. But, if we continue to allow our energy to be pumped into data centers in Virginia, we're not going to have them over here because the governor's goal, which I support, is ending the personal, income tax through the taxes that are created by these data centers. And we really need them in the southern part of the state. We're starting to become overly populated and dense here in the eastern Panhandle. I think the last thing anybody wants to see is one dropped here. But we're still waiting on the Rules Committee to put everything together to say, how these are going to be controlled. We're waiting to see that report, which we'll be voting on next year.
So for these properties that are being condemned and proposed to build these power lines, is that Virginia money that's buying out these properties?
No, that would be the private corporations.
Okay.
That are going to make money on it.
Chris, let me shift gears.
Stay on eminent domain for just a moment here, Chris, because we had, after this topic came up a few months back, we had an eminent domain attorney on the program, and he said, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he said, for the most part, once eminent domain, the claim has been made on the land, it's almost impossible to stop it, and that these claims go through almost all the time. Do you have any examples of when it's been fought and been fought successfully?
Well, I remember many years ago they had the path fight here in Jefferson County, and that they stopped it there. But once something's been condemned under eminent domain, it is a very uphill fight because, let's face it, the corporations who are the ones using eminent domain have the biggest wallets in the world to pay high-dollar attorneys. Meanwhile, property owners like myself or anybody else that lives here in the counties, we can't afford the big lawyer teams to protect us. So it is almost impossible to stop, but it has been stopped at different times. And the key to all this is making sure that the PSC in Charleston, which is appointed by the governor, does not approve the transmission line plan. That's kind of the crux of everything. If we can keep them from approving the transmission lines, none of this comes to fruition, and people get to keep the property, and we don't have our farmland and everything else taken up by these huge power lines. And you can put on a tinfoil hat and say, well, what does these power lines actually do? I mean, I've read studies about sterilizing cows and everything else, which certainly can't be good for humans to be around that. But the biggest problem I have is the eminent domain portion, and that once again we're being used for Virginia's profit when they're the ones that put in the crazy left-wing policies of only green new energy, and now they want to use us and use our energy to make up for the fact that they've gone essentially Fruit Loop.
Bill, stay here for a second because you have some PSC knowledge as well.
Yeah.
Is the PSC, in regards to approving a project, thumbs up or thumbs down, is it a situation where once all the necessary documentation and information has been provided, it's a formality that they just approve it if it meets all the specs, or do they have the ability to subjectively say, listen, you know what, It's not going through.
They say they can objectively, not subjectively, objectively disapprove. Now, you mentioned the Path project a few years ago. That never got to the PSC, if memory serves. The power company themselves decided there's a more economic route that literally bypassed West Virginia. So the Path project, even though there was a big pushback against it, never actually got to the PSC. But the PSC does, and they have frequently disapproved projects.
Even if it meets all the criteria necessary for the project to go forward? This is the question that I actually have.
Yeah,
that's why I said subjectively.
Yeah, and in that case, you may well be right, subjectivity, because there's evidence on both sides, and they weigh the evidence. And when you weigh evidence, the subjectivity does come into play. So.
Chris?
Yes.
Do you know? Does the PSC have the freedom to say we don't want it?
My understanding is the same as the admirals, and that is that they can vote up or down, and there will, in any situation like this, there's evidence both for and against. And like Bill said, then it can become objective about it and say, no, we're not going to support this. We're not going to vote for it.
Yeah, Chris, shifting gears quickly, and the bill that's the authority to the counties for levying some sort of sales tax, and it's been called safety tax and other names. What is your position on that, please?
First of all, it's a sales tax increase, and I ran on saying no new taxes, in fact, reduced taxes, and I fought very hard in the House to stop that bill because while I agree, and we've talked about this before, while I agree that we need to fund our EMS and our firefighters and our sheriff's departments better, they should be funded first in the budget, not used as some sort of lure to get people to tax themselves more. So I absolutely oppose that. That was a long, hard fight, and we stopped it dead. I'm sure they'll probably try to pass it again, but it's just a sales tax hike. Government needs to stop doing things like building dog parks and parks if they really feel that one of the core responsibilities of the government is safety and protection of the people. They need to fund that first, not everything else, and then go, oh, look, we don't have money for more deputies. We don't have money for more firefighters, so we're going to have to tax you more. No, that's one of the core functions of government. So I was very proud to fight against that and stop that. In fact, if you talk to anybody in the county that's a resident of the county, not involved in government at all, they were all opposed to it. I saw like nearly 8,000 petitions come out of the various counties stating, no, we don't want this. And it was overwhelming public against this. So absolutely, I was proud to lead the fight to stop it.
30 seconds, Bill.
Okay, yeah, but it was not. It was given the counties the right for a referendum, so the citizens themselves would be speaking to it. So why are we avoiding going back to let the people speak and make a decision?
Because it's the same thing with any other tax when they have a quote-unquote referendum. Government uses its money then to promote it and push it really, really hard so people think they have to vote for it. Whether it was the teachers' unions fighting against legislative control over the unelected Board of Education, the list is long and not very distinguished. Again, they use the public's money to convince them that they need to tax themselves more.
Chris, on that note, I've got to jump in because we are exactly out of time. Thank you so much for yours, sir.
Sure thing. Absolutely. Always great to talk to you,
Stay
gentlemen.
out of the wool.
Yeah. Right. Thanks, Chris. Been fun.
More to come after these.